Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the outer wall of a medieval castle just as winter dusk folds itself over the valley. Cold stone presses its chill through the air. Damp straw clings to the edges of the road and smoke gathers beneath the rafters of the gatehouse like a dark woolen canopy. Somewhere beyond the walls, monastery bells mark the fading hour, their slow notes drifting through river mist. Mud cakes your boots. Torchlight trembles across iron hinges. Horses breathe pale clouds into the evening, and every cloak smells faintly of wet wool wood smoke and the long road behind it. A guard looks at you as though medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, which, to be fair, they did. You probably would not last a week out here, not with the cold, the fleas, the questionable soup, and the general medieval suspicion of anyone whose hands look too clean. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what the local time is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck beneath the gate as the portcullis groans behind you, and the sound rolls through the stone passage like a tired beast settling down. The castle is not silent. Hooves strike the packed earth of the inner yard. A kitchen boy hurries past with a basket of onions. Two laundresses drag a wooden tub toward a side building, muttering about frozen water. A lean brown dog appears near the stable door, studies you with disappointment, and decides to follow. Above the yard, narrow windows begin to glow, on by one. Beeswax candles burn in the richer chambers, while cheaper tallow lights smoke in the rooms of servants and guards. Beeswax gives off a warm sweetness. Tallow carries the faint reminder that the light was once attached to an animal. You cross toward the great hall where the evening meal is ending. The doors stand open and heat spills into the passage. Inside, rushes cover the stone floor mixed with dried herbs meant to improve the smell. Lavender, meadowsweet, and rosemary struggle against damp boots, spilled ale, roasted meat, and old smoke. No one can quite agree whether fresh rushes truly sweeten a hall or merely hide what lies beneath them. Nobody volunteers to investigate. At the high end of the hall, noblewomen sit beneath embroidered hangings. Their gowns are heavy with wool silk and fur. Their veils catch the candlelight. They seem still and distant, as though the cold has carved them into painted saints. Yet the evening is loosening around them. The public hours are nearly over. You remain near a pillar, while servants clear trenchers of coarse bread and gather cups of watered wine. A lady rises from the dais. She is only the mistress of this keep, but the room shifts when she stands. Her steward pauses. Her chaplain lowers his cup. Even the dog beside you sits down, though perhaps someone has dropped a bone. The lady leaves the hall with 3 other women and several attendants. You follow at a respectful distance, passing from noise into narrower corridors. The air cools. Torchlight glides over painted plaster iron hooks and oak doors darkened by years of touch. From below comes the clang of a kitchen pot. From above comes a brief burst of laughter, quickly softened. The women move through a guarded doorway into the private side of the household. Privacy, however, is a generous word. A noblewoman sleeps near attendants' dresses before servants' praise with companions and lives among eyes trained to notice every gesture. Still after the hall, these chambers feel sheltered. A maid lifts a heavy curtain and warm air rolls out. The chamber beyond is lit by half a dozen candles. A brazier glows near the wall. Wool blankets lie folded on a chest, and a fur-lined cloak dries over a bench. Sprigs of juniper crackle softly in the heat. The lady enters, and her public face softens by a degree so small you might miss it. Her shoulders lower. One attendant unfastens the clasp at her throat. Another takes the iron keys from her belt and places them on a table. Those keys open linen chests, spice cupboards, storerooms, medicine boxes, and sometimes the locked space where letters are kept. In a castle, power often hangs from a woman's girdle and jingles when she walks. The other noble women settle near the hearth. One warms her hands, another asks for watered ale. A younger woman removes her gloves and rubs the red marks left by the seams. Their voices stay low. The walls are thick, but servants have ears. Guards have cousins, and cousins have an astonishing ability to carry private information to market. Some swear that noble chambers are full of secret tunnels, hidden doors, and masked visitors. Most nights are less exciting. There are hymns to mend household accounts, to review prayers, to say children, to quiet and draft sneaking under doors with the persistence of tax collectors. Yet night loosens ceremony. It allows glances to linger, whispers to lengthen, and truths to approach the edge of speech. An attendant closes the oak door. The iron latch drops into place. Outside, the hall continues to empty. Men call for more ale, benches scrape, a minstrel tests a string and is immediately told to stop. Within the chamber, the lady sits beside the brazier while her companions gather close. The brown dog slips inside just before the door shuts, circles twice on the rushes and lies down as though invited. You remain near the curtain, quiet and nearly invisible, while the last bell before full dark sounds from the abbey beyond the river. Its tone reaches through stone, smoke, wool, and winter air. The noble women listen without appearing to listen. Their night begins not with scandal or spectacle, but with the slow closing of doors, the easing of stiff shoulders, and the gentle arrival of candlelit secrecy. Beyond the shutter river mist thickens, and another torch gutters softly beside the sleeping gate. The bell's last vibration fades into the walls, yet supper has not entirely released its hold on the household. A maid enters with a covered wooden bowl, and the lady lifts one hand before the girl can set it down. "Not here," she says softly. The words are simple, but they move through the room with the quiet authority of a key turning in a lock. You follow as the women return not to the great hall but to a smaller chamber nearby, where the household's more private evening meal is being arranged. The great feast below has ended for the watching eyes of retainers, visitors, petitioners, clerks, and guards. Here, behind a carved oak screen, another supper begins slower and more careful. A long table stands beneath a faded wall hanging, showing a hunting scene. The embroidered deer appear surprisingly calm about the entire matter. Candles burn in brass holders, their flames leaning whenever the door opens. Fresh rushes cover the floor, and someone has scattered dried mint among them. A servant places coarse bread-smoked fish, stewed leeks, and a dish of thick pottage on the table. There are also small pastries filled with spiced apple, though only 4 have survived the journey from the kitchen. The brown dog notices this immediately. You settle near the wall while the noble women take their places. Seating matters even here. The lady of the castle sits nearest the fire. Her widowed aunt takes the place beside her. A younger cousin sits lower down, close enough to be included but far enough to remember her rank. Nothing in a noble household is ever simply a chair. A chair is a declaration, a warning, and occasionally an argument with legs. Servants lay bread trenchers before each woman. These thick slices will hold meat and sauce, soaking up grease until they become soft. Later they may be given to servants the poor, or the dogs, depending on the household and the mood of the steward. Some swear that bread from a noble table carries a little of the eater's fortune with it. Others say that this is merely what hungry people prefer to believe. The lady breaks her bread with both hands. Her rings catch the light. She eats slowly. Not because the food is delicate, but because every gesture has been trained into restraint. In the hall below, men may laugh with open mouths and call for another cup. Here the women speak in lower tones, and even their silences seem practiced. A cupbearer pours watered wine. The wine is dark, warmed with cloves, and a trace of cinnamon. Spices are costly, carried across roads and seas before reaching this cold keep, and their presence speaks as clearly as embroidery or silver. The widowed aunt tastes the drink and raises one eyebrow. The steward has discovered restraint, she murmurs. The younger cousin hides a smile. You notice how quickly the talk moves around its true subjects. A mention of the weather becomes a question about roads. A question about roads becomes a concern about arriving messengers. A concern about messengers becomes very gently a discussion of who has written to whom. No one asks directly whether a marriage offer has arrived for the younger cousin. Instead, the lady wonders whether the western road remains passable. The aunt remarks that a certain baron's men were seen near the river crossing. The cousin lowers her eyes and cuts a piece of smoked fish into pieces so small they may soon require a scribe to record them. Even now it is hard to tell whether such conversation is caution, habit, or sport. A servant places the pottage before them. It is made with oats, onions, peas, and a little salted pork. Noble tables are not always endless displays of roasted peacocks and sugared castles. Most evenings depend on the same dependable foods that fill humbler bowls, though richer households add spices, butter, better meat, and the important comfort of not wondering whether the pot will last until morning. You breathe in the warm smell of leeks and pepper. Outside the shutters, wind moves along the stone wall. The brazier pops. The dog inches closer to the table with the solemn patience of a monk awaiting revelation. The lady asks about the winter storehouses. Her household officer answers from near the doorway. Barley is holding well. 2 sacks of beans have spoiled from damp. The smoked eels are nearly gone. The apples in the north cellar have begun to soften. Salt is being used too quickly. The lady does not sigh, though you sense she would like to. A noblewoman's evening is rarely free from such matters. The castle may appear to belong to armed men, banners, horses, and stone towers, but much of its survival depends on quiet calculations made near a hearth. Flour wax, linen, ale, dried herbs, lamp oil, oats, and salt determine whether winter feels orderly or desperate. The lady asks how many beeswax candles remain. 23, the officer says. The aunt looks towards the 6 burning in the room. Then we are celebrating extravagantly. 1 candle is immediately snuffed. The room grows softer. Conversation resumes. A maid brings a small bowl of pears cooked in wine. The younger cousin reaches for one, then pauses until the lady has taken hers. Courtesy governs appetite. Rank governs courtesy. Hunger waits politely and takes notes. A chaplain appears at the door to remind them that the final prayers should not be delayed. He looks toward the wine, the pastries, and the comfortable fire with the expression of a man who deeply regrets choosing holiness at this particular hour. The lady dismisses him gently. You watch as the women relax once more, though never fully. The aunt tells a story about a merchant who tried to avoid a market toll by claiming that 6 geese were his travelling companions. No one can quite agree whether the story is true, but the household has repeated it for years, and truth has become less important than timing. The younger cousin laughs. The sound is brief and warm. It changes her face entirely. For a moment, the chamber feels almost ordinary. There is bread on the table, smoke in the rafters, candle wax softening along brass stems and cold, pressing against the shutters. The women lean toward one another as though the night has drawn a curtain around them. Then the lady's hand pauses over her cup. She has noticed a folded scrap of parchment beneath the edge of her trencher. No one speaks. The servant nearest the wall looks down. The aunt watches the fire. The cousin's smile disappears. The lady draws the parchment into her sleeve with one smooth movement and continues eating as though nothing has happened. This too is part of noble supper. Food nourishes the body. Seating reveals rank. Cups loosen words. And beneath bread, beneath courtesy, beneath the slow passing of dishes, the true business of night begins. The dog finally receives half a pastry. He accepts it without political comment. The folded parchment remains hidden inside the lady's sleeve, while supper comes apart around it. Servants lift the bowls, gather the stained trenchers, and carry away the last pears. The younger cousin wipes her fingertips on linen. The widowed aunt asks for the brazier to be carried back to the inner chamber. No one mentions the note. In a castle, silence is often less the absence of speech than a shared agreement about which truth must wait behind a closed door. You follow the women through the oak screen. The brown dog rises with a sigh, checks the floor for pastry, and trails after you. Inside, the chamber has changed. A fire has been stirred in the hearth. 2 maids have drawn the bed curtains against draughts. Another kneels beside a cedar chest, lifting out folded linen and soft wool. The lady stands near the table, still carrying the letter, but her attendants approach as though the only urgent matter is the unfastening of cloth. The ritual begins at her throat. A maid removes the brooch holding the outer mantle. The pin is long silver and sharp enough to punish careless handling. Another servant takes the fur-lined cloak and shakes away melted frost before hanging it near the hearth. Beneath it the lady wears a fitted gown of dark green wool, fastened along the sleeves with small cords. Each cord is untied slowly. Noble clothing displays rank, wealth, modesty, and patience, though patience is the quality most severely tested. Layers must be pinned, laced, belted, draped, and smoothed. A woman may spend much of the morning being assembled and a respectable part of the evening being carefully taken apart. The aunt settles on a cushioned stool and begins removing rings from swollen fingers. One ring refuses to move. An omen says the younger cousin. Poor workmanship, says the aunt. A maid rubs the finger with goose fat, and the ring finally slides free. Goose fat serves many purposes: cooking, lamp fuel, salves, leather treatment, and apparently rescuing jewelry from determined relatives. No one can quite agree whether it improves the smell of a chamber, but no one claims that it does. The lady's belt is loosened next. A small purse, a rosary, and a narrow ivory comb hang from it. The comb is carved with tiny, twisting animals. Such combs are used not only for grooming but also for removing lice, an evening task rarely celebrated in songs. The younger cousin notices you looking. Courtly love, she murmurs, is usually written by men who do not have to comb anyone's hair. The aunt gives a dry laugh. The servants begin taking down the veils. Pins are collected in a shallow wooden dish, because a lost pin may later be found by a bare foot, which is an effective way to make an entire household remember you. Fine linen is folded. A padded roll is removed from beneath the cousin's headdress. Without it, her hair loosens unevenly, and she looks younger and more tired than she did at supper. The lady's hair is braided beneath her veil. A maid unthreads a ribbon, then works patiently at the plait. The strands release slowly, carrying the faint scents of rosewater smoke and cold air. Hair is brushed with ivory and wooden combs. Rosemary is believed to strengthen memory. Sage may darken the hair. Vinegar is sometimes used against lice, and it certainly gives everyone something else to discuss. Some swear that hair cut beneath a waxing moon grows thicker. Others insist combings must be burned, so witches cannot use them in charms. The eldest maid gathers every loose strand and drops it into the fire. Even now it is hard to tell whether she acts from superstition, habit, or a practical wish to keep hair from collecting in the rushes. The parchment slips from the lady's sleeve. It lands beside the wooden dish of pins. The chamber stills. The younger cousin sees it first. The aunt sees the cousin seeing it. The maids look away with impressive speed, proving that servants can become invisible whenever survival requires it. The lady picks up the note. "Continue," she says. The attendants return to their work. Sleeves are loosened, shoes are removed, wool stockings are rolled down and placed near the brazier to dry. One maid rubs the lady's cold feet with a warmed cloth. Another brings beeswax salve, scented with marjoram for cracked skin. Only when the final outer gown has been folded does the lady break the seal. The parchment is small, written in a narrow hand. She reads without moving her lips. Firelight flickers over her face, but whatever the message contains remains hidden behind practiced calm. The aunt watches her. Well, the lady folds the note again. "The western road is open," she says, "nothing more." The cousin lowers her eyes. "You remember the careful mention of travellers and the baron's men near the crossing. The words may mean only that a road is passable. They may mean a messenger is coming. They may mean someone has already arrived." Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether noble women possessed secret networks of letters more efficient than the official messengers of men. But inside this chamber, among combs, veils, warming cloths, and half-burned candles, information moves with remarkable ease. The lady gives the note to the eldest maid. The maid holds it over the fire. For a moment the writing glows red through the parchment, then the edges curl inward, the seal blackens, and the message becomes weightless ash. Around you, the women are no longer dressed for the hall. Jewels lie in boxes, hair hangs loose or rests in simple braids. Their faces, freed from veils and ceremony, reveal fatigue, worry, and the relief of no longer being watched by an entire household, or almost no longer watched. The dog has taken possession of the lady's discarded shoe and rests his chin upon it with deep political confidence. Outside, wind presses against the shutters. Inside, servants shake out wool blankets, smooth the bed curtains, and collect the final pins. The women draw closer to the hearth, unfastened from the garments that announce who they must be by day. Now, with the note burned and the doors barred, they begin to speak. What they say first is not a secret at all. The widowed aunt complains that the chamber is too cold. A maid adds another log to the hearth, and sparks climb into the soot-dark chimney. The younger cousin pulls a wool shawl around her shoulders. The lady watches the last black edge of parchment collapse among the embers, then turns away as though the message has become no more important than ash. Before any further whisper can begin, the eldest attendant lifts a small brass handbell. Its sound is delicate, almost swallowed by the wind beyond the shutters. The women rise. Night prayers cannot be postponed forever, not even for letters from the Western Road. You follow them through a narrow doorway into a small oratory built against the chamber wall. It is scarcely larger than a storeroom. A painted virgin watches from above a stone shelf, her blue robe faded by smoke. Beside her stand two carved saints, darkened by generations of candles. The air smells of beeswax, old wood, and dried rosemary. A maid lights 3 tapers from the half-burned candle carried from the chamber. One flame becomes 4 generous for a household, counting every inch of wax. The aunt notices but says nothing. Even economy must occasionally bow to heaven. You kneel on a cushion stuffed with wool scraps. The stone beneath it still finds your knees with admirable determination. Noble devotion may be embroidered and attended by servants, but the floor remains medieval. The lady removes a small reliquary from a locked box. It is silver, no larger than a walnut, and shaped like a tiny chapel. Inside rests a fragment said to be from the Vale of St. Anne. No one can quite agree whether it truly came from any veil at all. The chaplain believes it did. The steward suspects a merchant in Rouen. The aunt once remarked that St. Anne must have owned enough fabric to sail a fleet. Still, the reliquary is handled with care. The lady touches it to her forehead, then passes it to the cousin. The girl closes her eyes. Perhaps she prays for the messenger on the Western Road. Perhaps for the marriage no one names. Perhaps only for warmer stockings. You bow your head while the eldest maid begins the prayers. Latin phrases flow quietly, some clear, others softened by repetition. Not every woman understands every word. Devotion is learned by sound before meaning held through rhythm breath and the familiar turn of a response. Monastery bells ring faintly across the river. The household pauses to listen. Their timing is not exact. Cold air, distance, and an elderly bell ringer all have opinions about the hour. Yet the notes settle over the castle, marking the night more surely than any clock. The lady whispers a prayer for travellers. The aunt prays for the dead. The cousin presses her fingers around a pilgrim badge sewn inside her sleeve. It shows the scallop shell of St. James, though she has never walked to Compostela. The badge belonged to her mother, who received it from a returning pilgrim. Such objects pass from hand to hand, carrying journeys their owners never made. Some swear that a pilgrim badge dipped in water can cure fever, others hang them near beds against nightmares. The cousin touches hers whenever the wind rises, as though the little piece of lead remembers roads and safe arrivals. A servant brings a shallow bowl of water, scented with rue. The lady dips 2 fingers into it and marks a cross upon her brow. Rue is used in remedies, charms, and protections against unseen harm, although too much can make a person ill. Medieval medicine often walks beside danger, while insisting it knows the path. The aunt takes only the smallest drop. "I trust the saint," she murmurs, "but not the gardener." The younger cousin almost laughs, then turns it into a cough. The prayers continue. You hear names, spoken softly. A child buried years ago, a brother far from home, a woman in labour at a nearby manor, a servant suffering from a swollen jaw. Publicly, noblewomen pray for kings, bishops, victories, and peace. Here they pray for cold hands, late riders, difficult births, spoiled grain, frightened children, and people who may never be named in a chronicle. The lady's voice catches once, only once. She asks St. Christopher to guard those travelling by night. Her fingers tighten around the rosary at her girdle. The beads are polished bone smooth from years of use. One bead is darker than the others, and a silver medal hangs beside the cross. Even now it is hard to tell whether her concern belongs to a kinsman, an ally, or the writer of the burned note. The eldest maid begins a prayer against sudden death. Everyone joins more firmly. Sudden death is feared not only because life ends, but because confession, forgiveness, and proper rites may be lost. A good death requires preparation. People live close to uncertainty, so they surround it with bells, candles, saints, and repeated words. At the end, the lady places a beeswax taper before the painted Virgin. The flame bends, steadies, and paints gold along the cracked plaster. A small pouch hangs from the shelf below. Inside are dried lavender, a scrap of scripture, and a thread said to have touched a saint's tomb. The chaplain disapproves of charms unless he has blessed them. The women keep several anyway. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether these objects are faith, superstition, or simply comfort given a shape small enough to hold. The brown dog scratches at the oratory door. A maid opens it, and he enters with no sign of repentance. He circles the cushions, sneezes at the rue water, and settles beneath the reliquary shelf. The aunt looks down at him. At least one creature here is certain of salvation. The lady smiles, but only briefly. When the final prayer ends, no one rises at once. Wax ticks softly as it melts. Wind moves along the outer wall. Somewhere below a guard coughs in the yard, and an iron chain knocks against a post. You feel the quiet deepen around the women. In this narrow shrine, rank loosens a little. Fear is allowed to exist without explanation. Grief may sit beside duty. Hope may be hidden inside ritual. At last, the lady touches the floor, crosses herself, and stands. The reliquary returns to its locked box. The pilgrim badge disappears beneath the cousin's sleeve. One taper is pinched out to save wax, leaving smoke curling before the painted saints. Then the women return to the chamber, carrying their prayers with them like small lights sheltered between cold hands. The small lights they carry are no more than memory by the time the women settle once again around the hearth. The oratory door closes. The eldest maid places the brass handbell beside the reliquary key, and another servant draws the curtains more tightly across the shutters. The chamber seems warmer now, though the fire has not changed. Perhaps prayer does this. Perhaps wool shawls do more. The lady takes her place on the cushioned bench. The widowed aunt chooses the chair nearest the brazier, where she can warm her feet without appearing to compete for comfort. The younger cousin sits upon a low stool with her hair hanging in a loose braid over one shoulder. For a few breaths, nobody speaks. Then a waiting woman opens a narrow chest and lifts out a small harp. Its frame is polished wood, dark with age and handling. One carved corner has been repaired with horn. The strings are gut-sensitive to damp, cold heat, and nearly every other condition found inside a medieval castle. A harp is an elegant instrument, provided it has not spent the afternoon absorbing river mist. The waiting woman tests the highest string. It answers with a sound like an offended mouse. The aunt closes her eyes. Music, she says, has begun. The woman adjusts the peg and tries again. This time the note rises clear and silver, hovering briefly beneath the soot-black rafters. She plucks another, then another, until a slow pattern fills the chamber. It is not loud enough to reach the hall below. It belongs to this room alone. You sit near the curtain listening as the rhythm softens the edges of the night. Firelight moves across the harpist's fingers. The brown dog lies with his nose upon the lady's shoe, one ear lifting whenever a string hums too sharply. A maid brings embroidery frames from the cedar chest. The lady receives a length of linen stretched over wood already crowded with vines, birds, and curling leaves. The cousin works on a silk purse stitched with blue thread. The aunt is given nothing. "My eyes are tired," she says. No one points out that her eyes were excellent when the pastries appeared. Needles flash in the candlelight. Coloured silk is expensive, and even small pieces are saved. Threads are wound around bone cards. Snipped ends disappear into a little pouch for later use. Nothing fine is wasted. A strand too short for embroidery may still mend a veil, mark a prayer book, or tie a charm around a child's wrist. The lady bends over her work. She is stitching a white hound beneath a hawthorn tree. To anyone else it may be decoration, yet symbols carry meanings easily hidden from those who do not know where to look. A hound may suggest loyalty. Hawthorn may speak of hope, protection, or dangerous love. Rosemary remembers, ivy clings. A broken branch may mourn an absence. Some swear that noblewomen hide whole messages in embroidery, arranging flowers and beasts like words written without ink. Others insist that later storytellers simply enjoy imagining secrets wherever women hold needles. Even now it is hard to tell whether the lady's white hound waits faithfully beneath the tree or warns that loyalty has been left outside in winter. The younger cousin glances toward it, then returns to the blue bird she is stitching on her purse. The harpist begins a romance about a knight who rides for 7 years before reaching the woman he loves. No one asks why he chooses such a poor route. Medieval heroes are often brave, courteous, and deeply in need of better directions. The song moves slowly through moonlit forests, ruined chapels, and fields of frost. The knight carries a token from his lady, a strip of green silk tied beneath his armor. Every verse ends with the same promise he remembers. The cousin's needle pauses. The lady notices. She says nothing. The harpist continues, her voice low enough that the words almost blend with the fire. When the knight finally reaches the tower, the lady of the song has married someone else, inherited 3 estates, and become far too occupied to stand at a window. The aunt nods approvingly. At last, a sensible ending. The room relaxes into quiet laughter. When the song ends, the cousin asks for a riddle. The aunt answers at once. What has a mouth but never eats, a bed but never sleeps, and runs while remaining in its place? The river, says the cousin. You have heard it before, you have asked it before. The aunt considers this unfair. Riddles pass long winter evenings. They are repeated in halls, kitchens, monasteries, and roadside inns. Some are clever, some ancient, and some survive only because no one has the heart to tell an elderly relative that everyone knows the answer. The lady offers another. What travels sealed speaks without a tongue and may burn more fiercely than wood. The cousin looks toward the hearth where the parchment was destroyed. A letter, she says. The harpist's fingers rest on the strings. For a moment the chamber grows still. Then the lady nods and places another stitch beneath the hawthorn tree. The cousin opens the small purse in her lap. From inside she draws a coil of red thread. She chooses a length no longer than her hand and quietly lays it beside the lady's embroidery frame. No words pass between them. Red thread may mean many things: protection from illness, a promise, a warning, a remembrance of blood ties. Some women knot it around keys or sew it inside hems where no one sees. Some swear that 9 knots tied while repeating a prayer can guard a traveller from losing the road. The lady threads the red silk through her needle. Instead of adding it to the hound or the tree, she stitches 3 tiny crosses beneath the border where the linen will later fold out of sight. The aunt watches without turning her head. The harp begins again. This time the song is older, perhaps older than the castle. It tells of a woman who waits at a forest shrine while snow covers every path. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether her lover returns, whether she becomes a nun, or whether she herself is the spirit travellers claim to see near the trees. The version sung tonight gives no answer. You listen to the final notes fade while the women continue their stitching. The half-burned candle shortens. The wet wool cloak near the fire begins to steam. Outside, footsteps cross the battlements, slow and regular, while the distant river moves unseen through the mist. The lady ties off the red thread. She cuts it with small iron shears. folds the hidden crosses beneath the linen, and places the embroidery into the cedar chest. The message, whatever it means, disappears beneath birds' vines and patient white cloth. The cedar chest closes with a soft wooden thud, and the hidden crosses vanish beneath its lid. Almost at once the chamber begins to shift. The hour grows later, yet the household does not settle. It merely changes hands. Men-at-arms keep the walls, cooks bank the kitchen fires. Stable boys check latches against the wind, and waiting women begin their quiet journeys through the castle. The eldest maid fastens a ring of iron keys to her belt. They are smaller than the lady's household keys, but no less important. One opens the linen press, another opens the medicine cupboard, a third belongs to a narrow stair hidden behind a tapestry in the outer chamber. The aunt hears the keys jingle. Subtle, she says. The maid wraps them in a strip of wool. Now they make scarcely any sound. You follow as she leaves the chamber carrying a covered basket. A younger attendant goes with her, holding a candle shielded by a horn lantern. The light glows amber through the thin, scraped panels, dim enough not to announce their passage through every corridor. The brown dog rises to join you. The maid points back toward the hearth. He sits down, disappointed by authority but not persuaded by it. You move along the passage where torch brackets cast long shadows over the walls. Behind one oak door, someone snores with extraordinary confidence. Behind another, two servants whisper until the keys brush the maid's wool wrapping, and the voices stop at once. Waiting women know nearly everything. They know which noble guest drinks too much wine, which steward cannot count, which child hides bread beneath a mattress, and which knight sends his shirts to the laundry with unfamiliar perfume upon them. They hear quarrels through curtains. They carry wash-water into chambers before dawn. They fasten veils, change bed linen, empty basins, prepare medicines, and stand nearby, while people forget that servants possess memories. No one can quite agree whether a castle's truest archive is kept by the scribes or by the women carrying towels through its passages. At the bottom of the stair, the maid unlocks a cupboard built into the wall. Inside are folded cloths, clay jars, bundles of herbs, and two stoppered bottles. She removes a packet of dried feverfew and a small pot of honey. The younger attendant adds these to the basket. For the laundress, you hear her ask. For her daughter. The girl has been coughing for 3 nights in a room above the brewhouse. The lady heard of it during supper, though no one saw anyone speak to her. News moves through the women's household without needing a herald. The maid locks the cupboard. You continue through the lower passage where the air smells of damp mortar and ashes. A kitchen servant waits near a doorway, wringing her apron in both hands. When the maid approaches, the girl produces a folded strip of cloth. Inside lies a tiny brass ring. My sister asks that it be returned, she whispers. To whom? The servant glances toward the ceiling as though the answer may be sleeping above. The maid takes the ring without comment. A waiting woman is expected to carry things safely, not always to approve of them. Some messages are written on parchment, others are spoken once and repeated exactly. Some are hidden inside sewing bundles, loaves, herb packets, or are the hollow stems of reeds. A brooch returned without its pin may mean refusal. A ribbon of a certain colour may mean caution. An empty purse may say more than a page of elegant Latin. Even now it is hard to tell how many such codes truly existed and how many were invented by later tales. Yet in a household where letters can be opened and messengers questioned, ordinary objects become useful precisely because they look ordinary. You climb another stair into a gallery overlooking the inner yard. Through the narrow arches, moonlight lies pale upon the mud. A watchman crosses below carrying a spear. His boots strike the frozen ground in a slow rhythm. The maid pauses beside a carved pillar. A second waiting woman emerges from the darkness. She belongs to the younger cousin's household, and beneath her cloak she carries a leather writing case. The two women exchange no greeting. One gives the brass ring, the other gives a sealed note no larger than 2 fingers. The note disappears beneath the herb bundles. The ring disappears into the writing case. This takes less time than crossing yourself. The women part. Some swear that noble women command whole networks of attendants who can move messages from castle to manor, manor to abbey, and abbey to market town without a single official seal. Perhaps this is true in places. More often the network is made of cousins, laundresses, nurses, widows, pilgrims, and servants who remember favours. Trust travels along these paths more slowly than rumour and breaks much more easily. The younger attendant keeps her eyes lowered as you descend toward the brew house. She has witnessed the exchange, but she will not ask. Questions can make a servant useful. Too many questions can make her unemployed. Near the laundry rooms the air grows warmer and wetter. Linen hangs from beams. A tub stands beside a dying fire. The laundress kneels near a pallet where her daughter sleeps beneath 2 wool blankets. The maid gives her the feverfew and honey. Boil the herb lightly, she says, not too strong. The laundress touches the lady's household badge, stitched to the maid's sleeve, then kisses her own fingers in gratitude. Feverfew is used for headaches, fevers, and many complaints that might respond equally well to rest. Honey soothes the throat and makes nearly every remedy easier to persuade someone to swallow. Some swear that sleeping with a hazel twig beneath the pillow prevents coughing. The laundress has already placed 2 there. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the child improves because of herbs, warmth, prayer, or time. Before leaving, the maid slips the small sealed note beneath a folded cloth in the basket. The laundress does not look at it, but when she later carries clean linen toward the guest wing, the message will travel with her. You retrace your steps through the castle. By the time you return to the private chamber, the harp has been put away. The aunt dozes near the brazier. The cousin sits beside the shutter, listening to the wind. The eldest maid kneels before the lady and places the basket on the floor. The medicine has gone, she says. The lady nods. And the other matter? The maid answers by setting 1 small brass ring upon the table. The cousin looks at it, then closes her eyes. Nothing more is said. The maid unwraps the wool from her keys. Their quiet jingle returns gentle and metallic, carrying all the weight of rooms opened, remedies delivered, rumours contained, and secrets moved safely through the sleeping stone. The little brass ring remains on the table between the lady and her cousin, catching the firelight each time the flames lean forward. Before either woman reaches for it, someone knocks. Not the confident rap of a steward or the heavy fist of a guard, but 3 quick touches against the oak door, followed by silence. The eldest maid rises at once. She listens, lifts the latch, and admits a breathless girl from the guest wing. "My lady," the girl whispers, "Mistress Aveline has taken ill." The lady stands without asking what has become of the ring. It is covered with a folded cloth, as though secrecy can be made harmless by good housekeeping. You follow the women into the corridor. The brown dog comes too, despite having received no invitation and showing no interest in medicine beyond anything cooked in fat. Mistress Aveline lies in a narrow chamber near the solar. She is an older gentlewoman who has served the household since the lady's marriage. Tonight her face is pale, and one hand presses beneath her ribs. A basin rests beside the bed. The rushes have been cleared away, leaving bare stone around the pallet, so that spilled water and herbs will be easier to clean. A maid has opened the shutter a finger's width. Close it says, "The aunt when she arrives behind you." The cold will finish what the illness began. Fresh air may help, says the younger attendant. Everyone looks toward the lady. Medieval medicine often begins this way: 3 confident opinions, 2 opposing remedies, and 1 sick person wishing everyone would speak more quietly. The lady closes the shutter halfway. Mistress Aveline complains of pain, dizziness, and a bitter taste. The household healer has been sent for, but she lives beyond the lower gate near the mill stream. Until she arrives, the women begin with what they know. The eldest maid unlocks the medicine chest. Inside are linen bandages, wooden spoons, clay pots, wax packets, dried roots, and small bundles labelled with scraps of parchment. There is sage for the mouth, fennel for digestion, comfrey for bruises, and lavender for rest. A dark glass bottle contains rose water. Another holds vinegar strong enough to make your eyes water from across the room. The lady selects dried mint and chamomile. Her hands move with the certainty of long practice. Noblewomen may not study in universities, yet many learn household medicine from mothers, nurses, widows, herb wives, and handwritten collections of remedies copied through generations. They are expected to recognize fevers, prepare poultices, supervise births, and know when a wound has turned dangerous. The aunt smells the mint. Too old, she says. It was gathered at midsummer. Then midsummer was too old. Still the herb is placed in a cup. A servant brings hot water from the kitchen. The journey has filled it with floating ash, which is removed with the corner of a cloth. Honey is stirred into the infusion. Mistress Aveline drinks 2 cautious mouthfuls and declares it unpleasant. This encourages everyone. Medieval remedies are often considered more trustworthy when they taste as though they resent the patient. The lady lays a warm linen cloth across Aveline's stomach. Another maid rubs her cold hands with rosemary oil. The younger cousin sits beside the bed and speaks gently, asking when the pain began and what she ate at supper. "Only fish," Aveline murmurs. The aunt looks suspicious. "And the pastry one?" And the second, Aveline closes her eyes. The mystery of the illness becomes slightly less mysterious. Still the pain worries the lady. She sends for the chaplain and asks that the healer be hurried through the gate. Outside, the wind rises, pushing smoke back down the chimney. The candles flutter and shadows move over the bed curtains. Some swear that illness enters a chamber through corrupted air. Others blame an imbalance of the body's humours, an unlucky planet, a broken fast, a malicious glance, or the offended spirit of a place. No one can quite agree whether Mistress Aveline suffers from cold, rich food grief or something hidden beneath all three. The healer arrives wrapped in a damp wool cloak. She is a broad, grey-haired woman named Maud, carrying a leather bag that smells of onions, wax, and rain. Mud darkens the hem of her gown. She bows briefly to the lady, warms her fingers over the brazier, and goes straight to the bed. She studies Aveline's eyes and tongue. She feels the pulse at both wrists. Then she examines a flask of urine held toward the candlelight, turning it slowly as though it contains the secrets of a kingdom. The dog watches with great seriousness. Maud asks what Aveline has eaten. This time the truth expands to include smoked fish pottage, 2 pastries, half a pear, cooked in wine, and a piece of cheese taken after the servants cleared the table. The aunt gives a satisfied nod. At last, a diagnosis. Maud does not laugh. Healers preserve authority by refusing jokes that are better than their own. She decides against bleeding. A box of leeches remains closed to the visible relief of everyone except, perhaps, the leeches. Bloodletting is common for many complaints, but experienced healers do not always reach for it first. Maud believes warmth and rest will serve better tonight. She mixes powdered fennel with honey and a little warmed ale. A linen pouch filled with chamomile and crushed dill is heated near the brazier, then placed carefully against Aveline's side. Around her neck, Maud hangs a small cloth charm containing a written prayer to Saint Brigid. The chaplain arrives just in time to disapprove of it. Was that blessed? He asks. It is now, Maud replies, handing it to him. He blesses the charm. Thus, theology and household efficiency reach a peaceful agreement. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such charms are used because people believe in their power, or because fear becomes easier to bear when tied inside a small piece of cloth. The cousin holds Aveline's hand. The lady supervises the changing of the warm compress. The aunt orders the room cleared of unnecessary servants, then remains herself, because noble rank has always been skilled at defining necessity. Slowly, Aveline's breathing eases. The pain does not vanish, but it loosens enough for her shoulders to rest against the pillow. Maud instructs that she be kept warm, given only thin broth before morning, and watched for fever. A maid records the instructions by repeating them 3 times. Another places a cup cloth and basin within reach. Wool blankets are tucked around Aveline's feet with a heated stone wrapped safely near them. The lady stays until the older woman falls asleep. When you return to the corridor, the castle seems quieter than before. The medicine chest is locked again. The unused leeches travel back inside their box. The chaplain carries away the blessed charm's spare thread, perhaps to prevent unauthorized miracles. Behind you, a waiting woman begins the long ordinary work of sitting beside the sick bed through the deepest hours of night. Ahead, in the private chamber, the brass ring still waits beneath its folded cloth. The brass ring is still hidden beneath the folded cloth when you return to the chamber. The fire has sunk lower. One candle has burned almost to its socket, and wax lies pooled around the brass holder like pale winter fat. The younger cousin stands beside the table, looking toward the covered ring without touching it. The lady enters last. She closes the door herself. For a moment only the wind speaks, pressing softly against the shutters. Then the lady lifts the cloth, takes the ring, and turns it between two fingers. There is no jewel, no engraving, and no mark of rank. It is the sort of object that might be bought in any market for a few coins. Yet the cousin's face tightens. He sends it back, she says, or someone sends it for him, the aunt replies. No one can quite agree whether the difference is hopeful. The lady places the ring in the cousin's palm and folds her fingers around it. Then she calls for parchment, ink, and the writing case. A waiting woman brings them from the locked chest. The case is made of dark leather stiffened with thin boards. Inside lie sheets of parchment, a penknife quills, sealing wax, and a horn of ink stoppered with cloth. There is also a small pouch of powdered sand for drying fresh writing. Writing at night is expensive. Candles cost money. Parchment costs more, ink freezes in winter, quills split, and scribes dislike being summoned after compline unless the matter concerns salvation, inheritance, or their supper. Tonight it concerns all three, though the supper belongs mainly to the scribe. A clerk named Martin arrives with sleep still clinging to his face. His fingers are stained black at the nails, and a wool cap sits crookedly over one ear. He bows to the lady, opens his writing board, and tries not to look at the ring in the cousin's hand. The lady begins with estate business. A tenant at the northern manor has failed to pay 2 seasons of rent. A mill wheel needs repair before the river freezes harder. 3 oxen have died. Through the reeve's account somehow lists 4 new hides and only 2 missing animals. The arithmetic has developed the sort of miracle that interests stewards more than saints. Martin dips his quill. The lady dictates carefully, asking that the reeve appear before the manor court and bring every tally stick in his keeping. Wooden tally sticks are split lengthwise after debts are notched into them, 1/2 kept by each party. Matching the pieces confirms the account at least until someone loses a half, burns it, or claims a goat ate it. Some swear that a dishonest reeve fears a matched tally more than confession. The next letter concerns grain. Barley must be moved from a damp storehouse. Salted fish should be purchased before market prices rise. 2 bolts of linen are to be sent to the convent where the lady's youngest daughter is being educated. The convent has also requested more beeswax, which the aunt calls a holy appetite. She dictates another letter to a neighbouring widow about a disputed boundary hedge. The words are courteous, but beneath them lies a firm warning. The hedge belongs to this estate, the ditch marks the old line, and 6 elderly villagers remember it clearly enough to become inconvenient. Then the marriage letters begin. The younger cousin sits near the fire, the ring hidden inside her sleeve. Martin sharpens a fresh quill. The lady chooses each phrase with greater care than before. She writes to the cousin's brother, asking whether negotiations with the western baron remain open. She does not mention affection. Noble marriages are built from land, kinship, inheritance, peace, and the useful habit of preventing neighbouring families from attacking each other before harvest. Still, affection finds narrow spaces. The lady asks whether the proposed husband is kind to servants. The aunt looks at her. Martin pauses. That is not customary, he says. It is now the lady answers. He writes it. A second letter goes to an abbess who knows the baron's household. The lady asks about the man's health, temper, debts, companions, and whether his mother truly controls the keys to every storeroom. That last question matters most. In many noble households, a new bride enters a world already governed by an older woman with stronger alliances, longer memory, and possession of the linen keys. Castles have survived sieges with less tension than two ladies deciding who controls the spice chest. The clerk finishes the formal letters and reaches for sealing wax. The lady stops him. One more. This one is not dictated aloud. The cousin rises and asks Martin for the quill. He hesitates, then gives it to her. Noble women vary greatly in their ability to write. Some can read Latin and compose elegant letters. Others recognize only prayers, names, and household marks. Many dictate because writing is considered a clerk's labor, not because they lack the skill. The cousin bends over a small scrap of parchment. Her hand is slow but practiced. You cannot read every word from where you stand. You see only fragments, road promise, returned and safe. Then she writes a name. The aunt turns toward the fire, granting privacy by pretending not to notice. The lady watches the door. Martin studies his penknife as though it has suddenly become a masterpiece. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether women send secret love letters as often as romances claim. But affection, fear, and disappointment leave few records precisely because wise people burn them. The cousin folds the note into a narrow strip. She does not seal it with wax, which might reveal too much. Instead, she threads it through the brass ring and wraps both inside a piece of linen. The eldest maid takes the bundle. At dawn, the cousin whispers. Martin seals the official letters with the lady's signet. Warm wax darkens beneath the carved impression. Estate's debts, grain boundaries, marriage and affection now lie together on the same table, separated only by seals and silence. Outside, the first hint of deeper night settles over the battlements. Inside, the sand dries the ink, the half-burned candle gutters, and the smallest letter waits to travel farthest. The official letters are stacked beneath a smooth stone, while the smaller bundle containing the brass ring disappears into the eldest maid's sleeve. Martin the clerk gathers his quills, blows gently across the last seal, and bows himself out of the chamber. The women do not prepare for sleep. Instead, the lady calls for the household rolls. Two servants bring a long wooden chest and set it near the hearth. Inside lie folded accounts. Lists of rents, inventories of linen, tallies of grain notes concerning servants, and scraps of parchment recording nearly everything required to keep the castle from becoming a very large, very cold ruin. You settle near the brazier as the lady opens the first roll concerning winter stores. The figures are written in several hands, one so crooked that the aunt suspects a mule was involved. The lady traces the lines with one finger. 12 sacks of barley remain in the western granary. 8 barrels of ale are sound. 1 barrel has soured. Salted beef will last perhaps 6 weeks, if portions are watched. Smoked fish has already become the subject of suspiciously creative arithmetic. A kitchen officer stands near the door, twisting his cap. 2 baskets were spoiled by damp, he says. Yesterday it was one, the lady replies. He studies the floor. The brown dog asleep beside the hearth opens one eye as though he too distrusts the account. The lady orders the storeroom inspected before sunrise. She instructs that the sound fish be moved, the spoiled pieces buried beyond the kitchen garden, and the north wall checked for leaks. Nothing is wasted lightly, but neither is bad food allowed to poison half the household, simply because winter has made everyone sentimental about herrings. Next comes linen. Sheets, towels, tablecloths, veils, swaddling bands, napkins, altar cloths, and undergarments are counted with a seriousness usually reserved for military supplies. Linen is expensive and always disappearing into laundries, sick rooms, nurseries, and guest beds. The eldest maid unlocks the linen press. 4 sheets are missing, she says. The aunt looks toward the guest wing. The visiting knights, more likely their squires. Some swear that linen vanishes because servants steal it. Others blame careless washing burial shrouds, childbirth, or guests who wrap possessions in whatever cloth lies nearest. No one can quite agree how a household may own 50 sheets in autumn and 27 by Candlemas. The lady orders every chest counted again. Then come the servant. A groom has injured his wrist. A scullion wishes to marry a baker's daughter. One maid has been accused of taking candle ends. A watchman has fallen asleep twice at the Eastern Tower. The laundress's daughter remains ill, though the feverfew has reached her. Each matter seems small until you understand that a castle is made of such small matters. The lady approves 3 days of lighter work for the groom. She permits the scullion's marriage after harvest, provided the baker agrees to keep the couple near the castle. She asks that the maid accused of stealing wax be questioned privately, rather than shamed in the hall. Candle ends are often taken for prayer, the cousin says, or for meeting someone in a hayloft, says the aunt. The lady considers both possibilities. The watchman will lose 2 days' pay, but keep his post. It is midwinter, and replacing him may be harder than frightening him into wakefulness. A nurse enters carrying a sleeping child wrapped in wool. The boy is the lady's youngest son, perhaps 5 years old, warm-cheeked and heavy with dreams. He has woken coughing and refused to settle unless brought to his mother. The lady takes him without interrupting the account. The child curls against her shoulder while she discusses market tolls, wax supplies, and the repair of a cracked oven. Power looks different now. It is not a sword or a seal. It is a woman holding a sleeping child with one arm while deciding how much rye can be spared to feed 30 servants through snow. The nurse reports that another child has lost a milk tooth. It has been wrapped in cloth and placed near the hearth. Some households bury children's teeth beneath a threshold. Others burn them, throw them into a fire, or give them to mice in hopes that the new teeth will grow strong and sharp. The aunt believes the mouse custom explains certain members of the family. The cousin hides a smile. A small iron key opens the chest containing spices. Pepper cloves, cinnamon, ginger, saffron, and nutmeg are listed by weight. These are not merely flavors. They are medicine, hospitality, status, and money that happens to smell pleasant. The lady notices that ginger has been used too quickly. The kitchen officer blames a remedy prepared for Mistress Aveline. The aunt raises one eyebrow. Then she has recovered at great expense. The lady orders future medicinal spices recorded separately. She also sends instructions that Aveline receive thin broth before dawn and no pastry, even if she claims a saint has prescribed it. The roles continue. There are candles for the chapel oats, for the horses, wool blankets for guests, lamp oil for the gatehouse, soap for the laundry, and firewood for every room important enough to complain. The lady listens and remembers. She knows which widow pays rent late because her sons are away. She knows which servant supports an elderly mother. She knows which storeroom lock sticks in wet weather. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how much authority noble women truly exercise in each castle. Custom and husbands differ. Widows often hold more freedom than wives. Yet, when men ride to war, court, hunt, or council, the keys remain behind, and someone must keep the grain dry. At last, the child stirs. A distant bell sounds through the mist, slow and low. The lady closes the final roll. Around her, the household's hidden machinery continues turning, bread rising in the kitchen, guards pacing the walls, all settling in barrels, sick people sleeping beneath warm cloths and letters, waiting for dawn. She gives the rolls back to the eldest maid and carries her son toward the bed curtains. The keys at her girdle touch softly together. The sound is small, almost gentle, yet the entire castle seems to rest upon it. The keys fall silent when the lady reaches the bed curtains. She lays her sleeping son beside the nurse, tucks the wool blanket beneath his chin, and waits until his breathing settles. Then the eldest maid appears at the doorway. The widow from Mereford is waiting in the gallery. The lady looks toward the half-burned candle. At this hour, she says, the steward refused her twice by daylight. The aunt opens her eyes. Then this is exactly the hour. You follow the lady into a narrow gallery overlooking the great hall. Beneath the cold, watchful gallery arches, benches scrape across flagstones. Ash is swept from the hearth. A sleepy page gathers cups while trying not to fall into the rushes. Above, behind a carved screen, the widow waits. She is wrapped in a brown cloak patched at both elbows. Frost shines on the hem. She bows deeply when the lady approaches. Her husband held a small tenancy near the marsh. He died before harvest. The steward now claims that the holding must return to the manor because no adult son remains. The widow has 2 daughters, 6 hens, 1 lame cow, and nowhere else to go. By day, the matter belongs to the manor court. By night, it belongs to whoever is willing to listen. The lady asks how much rent is owed, who witnessed the agreement, whether the daughters can work the land, and whether the reeve measured the boundary. Fear tangles the widow's dates and names. Was your husband given a tally? The widow produces half of a hazel stick from inside her bodice. Its notches show grain delivered, rent paid, and 1 unresolved debt. The matching half should be held by the steward. Wood, unlike memory, is difficult to frighten. Some swear that sleeping with a tally beneath the pillow keeps dishonest collectors away. Others say it only gives a tired person something uncomfortable to blame for poor rest. The lady takes the stick. She stays until the court hears her claim. No proclamation is made. The lady simply gives the tally to her maid and orders that the steward receive it with breakfast. The aunt smiles faintly. Nothing improves porridge like evidence. The widow is guided away with a promise of bread, onions, and oats. Then another visitor appears. This one is a knight's younger brother, dressed too finely for midnight. His fur-lined cloak is dry, his boots polished, and the perfume on his gloves reaches you before his greeting. He wishes to discuss a marriage. Naturally, he does not say so. He praises the lady's horses, moves from horses to the western road, from the road to the baron whose men travel it, and from the baron with the elegance of a cart, losing a wheel to the unmarried cousin. He suggests that his family might offer safer lands, stronger connections, and honourable treatment. The aunt asks whether this is the same household where his sister left after 6 months. The heir did not agree with her, he says. The husband did not agree with her, the aunt replies. The conversation remains perfectly courteous. That is what makes it dangerous. Influence often moves through suggestions rather than commands. A seat near the hearth signals favour. A guest lodged beside the chapel is honoured, while one sent near the kennels is encouraged to shorten his visit. Gifts speak. Silences speak louder. Even the order in which cups are filled may be remembered for years by people with little else to entertain them. The lady says all marriage discussions must wait. He presses once. She asks whether his family has settled its debt to the abbey. He does not press again. No one can quite agree whether the debt is truly large or merely useful. Either way, it escorts him out with admirable speed. A chaplain then arrives carrying a village priest's petition. The chapel roof leaks above the altar. 2 lead sheets are needed before snow deepens. The steward has refused the expense. Lead is costly. Souls, the chaplain says, are costlier. The aunt suggests moving the altar 6 feet left. The chaplain does not find this spiritually satisfying. The lady promises 1 sheet from the castle stores and asks the neighbouring priory for another. In return, the priest will say a monthly mass for the household dead. Patronage binds prayer to property favour, to remembrance and generosity, to the hope that heaven keeps accounts more accurately than stewards do. You move into an antechamber, where 2 officers argue over grazing rights on the eastern meadow. One says villagers drive too many animals there. The other says the Lord's horses take the best ground. The lady listens while weak ale is poured into small cups. Who repaired the fence last spring, the villagers one admits, and who cut it for the hunting carts? Silence. The brown dog, having escaped the chamber again, wanders in and drinks from a forgotten cup. The aunt watches him. At least one party has resolved its dispute. The lady decides the meadow remains shared until Candlemas. Afterward, villagers may graze cattle on the lower half, while the lord's horses keep the ridge. The fence must be repaired with timber from the south wood, and hunting carts must use the river track. No seal confirms this yet, but everyone understands that the matter is settled. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. How many decisions made in such rooms later appear under a man's name? By morning, a clerk may write that the Lord has shown mercy, supported a chapel, delayed a marriage, or settled a quarrel. Tonight you watch the choices form before they reach parchment. They are shaped beside dying candles, over weak ale behind screens between prayers, and bedtime. The lady protects tenants, tests alliances, returns favours, and closes doors without raising her voice. At last, The gallery empties. Only cold stone, the fading scent of rushes below, and the distant tread of the watch remain. The lady turns toward the stair. Before descending, she looks through an arrow slit toward the eastern wall, where a torch moves slowly against the dark. Something in that movement makes her pause. Then she gathers her cloak and begins climbing toward the battlements. The stair curls upward through the thickness of the wall. You follow the lady as she climbs, one hand gathering her fur-lined cloak, the other touching the damp stone for balance. The steps are narrow and worn hollow, in the middle by generations of boots. Cold settles more deeply with every turn. Below the castle smells of smoke ale, wool, and sleeping bodies. Above the air carries iron frost, and the dark emptiness beyond the walls. The brown dog comes after you for 6 steps, decides military inspection is beneath him, and returns to the hearth. At the top, a guard lifts the heavy bar from a small oak door. Wind pushes inward the moment it opens. The lady draws her cloak close and steps on to the battlement walk. Night surrounds the keep. The valley has vanished beneath river mist. Only the highest trees rise through it, black and still. Farther away, the abbey tower stands as a shadow against the clouded sky. One bell sounds from there, thin with distance, then another. The notes seem to travel slowly over frozen fields, losing warmth as they come. Along the wall, watchfires burn inside iron baskets. Some flame brightly, others glow low beneath ash. Men-at-arms pace between them with spears resting against their shoulders, their wool hoods stiff with frost. A younger guard holds his hands over a brazier and turns them one palm at a time. The lady stops beside him. "When was this fire fed?" The guard straightens. "Not long ago, my lady." The fire gives a weak red sigh that suggests a different opinion. She orders another basket of wood brought from the gatehouse store. Watchfires are not decoration. They provide warmth, light, the wall-worn travellers away from ditches and signal danger to neighbouring towers. In a lonely keep, one neglected flame may become the difference between seeing a rider and merely hearing hooves too late. You walk eastward along the wall. The stones beneath your boots are slick with frozen damp. Arrow slits cut the darkness into narrow views. The river road, the lower bridge, the forest track, the roofs of the village crouched beyond the outer ditch. Here and there smoke rises from houses where banked fires survive beneath ashes. The lady asks about the torch she saw from the gallery. The captain of the watch points towards the eastern tower. A patrol returning from the orchard wall. Why so slowly? One man twisted his ankle. This explanation should settle the matter, but the lady continues watching. Darkness changes ordinary things. A hedge becomes a crouching figure. A loose shutter becomes a whispered warning. A fox moving through dead grass may sound like 3 armed men with poor intentions. The night guard must learn not only to see danger, but also to survive imagination. Some swear that carrying a piece of rowan wood protects a watchman from wandering spirits. Others tuck iron nails into their boots or mark crosses in soot above the guardroom door. One soldier on this wall wears a wolf's tooth beneath his tunic, though the chaplain has told him repeatedly that teeth are not theology. The aunt arrives behind you, breathing heavily from the stairs. If danger waits above, she says it has chosen an inconvenient address. A guard offers her his stool near the brazier. She accepts without ceremony. The lady questions the captain about the gate chains, the bridge timbers, and the number of torches remaining in the store. 3 have been used since dusk. 1 burned poorly because the pitch was damp. Another was carried to the lower yard when a cartwheel broke. You remember the scrape of wheels earlier and imagine some exhausted driver still arguing with frozen wood. The captain says the outer gate is barred, the postern is locked. 2 men stand at the lower tower. A horn hangs beside every watch station, though one has split near the mouthpiece. The aunt asks whether it still sounds. The captain raises it and blows. The horn produces a noise like a sick cow objecting to sunrise. It warns effectively, the aunt says. The lady orders it replaced. You continue toward the eastern corner. From here the road appears only when the mist thins. Pale frost lies across the fields. A roadside shrine stands where the forest path bends its wooden roof silvered by moonlight. Travellers leave candles, ribbons, pins and small coins there for safe passage. Tonight, no candle burns. The lady rests both hands upon the parapet. She is waiting for something. Perhaps a rider from the western road, perhaps news that the burned letter promised. Perhaps nothing more than proof that all the people within these walls may safely reach morning. No one can quite agree whether noblewomen commonly inspect battlements at night. Some do. When husbands are absent, some never climb farther than the solar. Custom bends beneath necessity, personality, age, and the simple fact that a lady who controls the household may wish to see the wall on which that household depends. A shape moves near the river. The nearest guard reaches for his spear. You hold still. The shape pauses, lowers its head, and crosses a patch of pale ground. A deer. Everyone breathes again. The aunt looks at the captain. Question it carefully. The joke passes softly along the wall, easing shoulders without breaking the quiet. Then a second movement appears farther west. This one carries light. A lantern sways above the road, disappears behind mist and returns. Another follows it. The guards lean toward the parapet. One man lifts a shuttered signal lamp, but waits for the lady's command. The lights advance slowly. At last, you hear bells. Not abbey bells, small harness bells muffled by cold air. A mounted party approaches the bridge, perhaps 4 riders and a pack-horse. Their cloaks are dark. One carries a staff bearing a shape you cannot yet identify. The captain calls down to the lower gate. A watchman answers from below. Who comes? The reply drifts upward, broken by distance and wind. You catch only the word messenger. The lady does not move. The lanterns reach the outer barrier and stop. Guards question the riders about their lord, their road, and their purpose. Names pass through the darkness. One causes the lady's hand to tighten upon the stone. Even now it is hard to tell whether she fears the messenger's arrival or has feared more that no messenger would come. The gate remains closed while the captain sends a man down to verify the seal. Such caution is ordinary. False messengers, stolen badges, and invented names belong to both history and anxious imagination. A rider may wait in the cold until someone inside recognizes his token. Below the chain rattles. The postern opens narrow and black. One rider is admitted while the others remain beyond the barrier. His lantern disappears beneath the gatehouse arch. Hooves strike stone slow and hollow. The lady turns from the parapet. Bring him to the lower chamber, she tells the captain. Give his horse mash and warm cloths. No one wakes the hall. Then she begins the descent. You follow her into the stair tower, leaving the watchfires behind. The door closes against the wind. Darkness presses close around the narrow steps, but below a servant is already climbing with a candle. The flame trembles between you. Somewhere beneath the castle, iron bolts slide back into place. A messenger stamps snow from his boots, and the secret business of night moves indoors once more. The messenger waits in the lower chamber with snow melting from his cloak and forming a dark pool around his boot. He is younger than you expect, red-eyed from wind and long riding. A servant gives him warm ale, but he holds the cup without drinking. His seal has been examined. His name has been confirmed. Still, he looks as though the message itself weighs more heavily than the road. The lady enters with the aunt, the cousin, and the eldest maid. "My lady," he says, bowing, "your sister's labour has begun." For one breath, the room becomes completely still. The manor lies nearly 12 miles west beyond the river crossing, and a stretch of forest road already whitening beneath frost. The messenger says the pains began before Compline. The midwife is present, but the household requests the blessed birthing girdle kept in the castle chapel. The lady turns at once. "Bring the reliquary chest." You follow her back through the sleeping keep. The small procession moves quickly, but without panic. A horn lantern fur-lined cloaks the messenger, 2 waiting women, and the brown dog who joins for reasons known only to himself. In the private chamber, the cousin gathers linen cloths, beeswax candles, and a pot of rose oil. The aunt supervises from beside the brazier. "More blankets," she says. "There are already 4. Then the child will arrive in a room containing 4 blankets and one regrettable decision. No one argues. Childbirth among noble families is surrounded by preparation, prayer, fear, and ceremony. Weeks before the expected time, a woman may withdraw into a confinement chamber where shutters are covered, drafts are blocked, and male visitors are kept outside. The room becomes warm, dark, and enclosed, intended to resemble safety itself. Sometimes it succeeds mainly in resembling a very expensive cupboard. The lady opens a carved chest lined with faded red cloth. Inside rests a long embroidered girdle rolled around a wooden core. It bears prayers to the Virgin and Saint Margaret, whose story of escaping from a dragon makes her a favoured protector of women in labour. The logic is difficult to challenge. Anyone who survives being swallowed by a dragon has clearly established useful credentials. The girdle has been carried through the family for 3 generations. It has touched saints' shrines, or so the household believes. Small lead pilgrim badges are sewn along one edge. A scrap of parchment bears holy words in cramped Latin. No one can quite agree whether the girdle was truly blessed at Canterbury, Rome, or a roadside chapel by a priest with persuasive confidence. Yet every woman in the chamber handles it as carefully as a crown. The lady wraps it in clean linen. A second message is dictated for the manor. The midwife is to receive whatever she requires from the stores. A priest must remain nearby, but outside the chamber unless called. Warm water should be prepared continually. The windows must not be sealed so tightly that the air becomes foul. The aunt nods at this last instruction. Faith is helpful. Breathing is also well regarded. You descend toward the outer yard, where horses are being saddled beneath torchlight. Steam rises from their backs. A groom tightens straps with stiff fingers, while another packs bread-dried apples and a skin of ale for the road. The lady cannot leave the castle tonight. Her son is sleeping above, the household is under her authority, and the road is uncertain. Instead, she sends the eldest maid and the younger cousin with the girdle. The cousin hesitates. You trust me with it. I trust you to remember what fear feels like, the lady says. The answer settles something between them. Before the party departs, the lady leads you into another chamber near the nursery. It is empty now, but prepared for future confinement. Heavy curtains cover the walls. A bed stands beneath a canopy painted with stars. A low stool rests beside it, along with a birthing chair whose broad wooden seat has a crescent-shaped opening. Bundles of dried herbs hang from a beam. Lavender mugwort, fennel and rue. Some are meant for scent, some for remedies, and some because an older nurse insists no proper chamber should lack them. A small piece of iron lies beneath the bed. Iron is believed to guard against spirits, troublesome fairies, and the many unseen dangers thought to gather around birth. Knives may be placed near doorways. Knots are untied throughout the room because closed knots are sometimes believed to hinder the opening of the body. Cupboards stand ajar. Laces are loosened. Even braided hair may be undone. Some swear that every closed lock must be opened when labour begins. Others insist only the door matters. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether these customs bring protection or simply give frightened attendants useful work. The lady checks the supplies, swaddling bands of soft linen, wool blankets, clean thread, a basin, warmed oils, and a small silver spoon for feeding, honeyed water if needed. Childbirth leaves few people idle. Midwives guide, nurses heat cloths, servants carry water. Female relatives pray, reassure, remember earlier births, and occasionally offer advice nobody requested. Men wait outside. This is partly modesty, partly custom, and partly an acknowledgement that men standing helplessly in a hot chamber improve very little. The messenger drinks at last while the horses are brought to the gate. The cousin fastens the birthing girdle beneath her cloak. The eldest maid checks the medicine basket and wraps the iron keys in wool so they will not jingle along the road. The postern opens. Cold air pours beneath the arch. You stand beside the lady as the riders pass one by one into the mist. Harness bells are muffled with cloth. The cousin turns once in the saddle, her face pale beneath the hood, then follows the lantern onto the western road. The gate closes behind them. For the next hours there can be no quick news, only waiting. The lady returns to the small oratory. She lights a taper before St. Margaret and places one hand upon the stone shelf. The aunt joins her. So does the nurse. So do two servants who have never met the labouring woman, but understand the danger. You kneel among them while the castle grows quiet again. Beyond the walls the riders carry linen, herbs, prayers, and a girdle whose history may be sacred, invented, or both. At the western manor, shutters are covered, knots are untied, water is warmed, and women gather around a bed beneath painted stars. Here the lady watches the candle flame. It burns steadily. No one speaks of omens, though everyone sees one. The candle before St. Margaret burns steadily until wax reaches the second painted mark upon its stem. No one in the oratory speaks. The lady remains kneeling, her hands folded, while the aunt shifts carefully upon the cushion and pretends that cold stone has not defeated every joint in her body. Beyond the narrow wall, the castle waits with them. Kitchen fires are banked, guards pace above the mist. Somewhere in the nursery a child turns beneath wool blankets and murmurs in sleep. Then footsteps race along the passage. The oratory door opens before the eldest maid can knock. She has returned from the western manor with frost upon her cloak and mud almost to her knees. Her face is pale from the road, but she is smiling. A daughter, she says, both mother and child, live. The lady closes her eyes. Relief moves through the little room like warmth returning to frozen hands. The aunt crosses herself. The nurse begins to weep quietly. A servant laughs, then covers her mouth as though joy after midnight may violate household rules. The lady takes the burning taper from the shelf and lights a second candle beside it. Within moments the news travels. A bell rings in the chapel tower, not the solemn pattern for death or danger, but a bright sequence of notes that tumbles across the roofs and down toward the village. Doors open. Sleepy servants appear in corridors. The kitchen is ordered awake. Ale is brought from the buttery, and sweet cakes saved for a feast day are removed from a locked chest. The aunt watches this with concern. How many cakes? 24, says the steward, then announce the birth to no more than 23 people. The feast begins before anyone has properly decided to hold one. You enter the great hall as servants relight wall torches and stir the central hearth. Fresh rushes cannot be laid at this hour, so boys sweep aside the worst of the old ones and scatter dried rosemary over what remains. Smoke climbs into the rafters. Benches scrape across stone. Musicians emerge from their sleeping quarters carrying pipes, drums, a rebec, and expressions suggesting that celebration is a noble custom best practiced before compline. A trestle table is raised near the dais. The kitchens send what can be prepared quickly: coarse bread, wheels of cheese, smoked pork, pickled onions, roasted apples, spiced nuts, and a pot of pottage strengthened with butter. The precious sweet cakes arrive beneath linen flavoured with honey and dried fruit. Warm wine is poured with cinnamon and cloves. The kitchen officer counts every spoonful of spice as though his own children are being sprinkled into the cups. The lady enters, wearing her fur-lined mantle over her loosened evening gown. Her hair has been hastily covered with a simple veil. There is no time to reconstruct the polished figure who presides over daylight ceremony, yet no one mistakes her authority. She announces the safe birth. Cups rise. The hall answers with a gentle cheer softened by lateness and stone walls. The dogs beneath the tables hear only the word feast and begin their own celebrations. A household custom requires that 3 pieces of bread be placed near the hearth, one for the mother, one for the child, and one for any wandering spirit who might otherwise grow jealous of their good fortune. The chaplain objects to feeding spirits. The aunt suggests calling the 3rd piece a donation to an invisible pilgrim. This satisfies no one, but the bread remains. Some swear that a child born while bells are ringing will possess a strong voice. Others believe a midnight birth grants unusual dreams. No one can quite agree whether the little girl arrived before the bell or whether the bell merely began before the midwife finished declaring the hour. Either way, the household has already decided she will be remarkable. The musicians begin a slow dance. At first, only younger members of the household join. Men and women form two lines beneath the torchlight, stepping forward, bowing, retreating and turning with careful grace. The floor is uneven, the rushes slippery, and elegance requires everyone to behave as though neither fact exists. A visiting squire turns too quickly and nearly enters the pottage. He recovers with dignity, though the pottage appears disappointed. Masks are brought from a chest used for winter entertainments. They are simple things of painted leather and linen, a fox, a stag, a green-faced forest spirit, a woman crowned with paper stars. Masked games allow people to speak more boldly, though everyone generally recognizes everyone else by height, shoes, and poor judgment. The younger cousin has not yet returned from the manor, so the lady watches from the dais beside the aunt. For once, she does not discuss grain rents, marriage terms, or leaking chapel roofs. She holds a cup of warmed wine between her hands and listens to the rebeck. A masked fox approaches a lady from the guest wing and offers her a sprig of rosemary. For remembrance, he says. For your wife, she asks. The fox retreats. Guarded flirtation moves through the hall in tokens, songs, and glances. A ribbon is tied around a musician's wrist. A cup is passed to the same person twice. One young widow chooses the stag as her partner and spends the entire dance pretending she has not recognized the steward's nephew beneath the antlers. Servants struggle to keep order without appearing to notice disorder. Ale spills. Candle wax drips onto a bench. A hound steals half a cheese and disappears beneath the dais. Two pages argue over who must retrieve it. The kitchen sends another platter of apples, then demands the empty platter back before someone uses it as a shield. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether medieval noble feasts are wild nights of abandon or mostly long evenings of formal dancing interrupted by digestive difficulty. Tonight, both possibilities seem modestly represented. A mummer begins a comic tale about a knight who mistakes a monastery laundry for an enchanted palace. His performance includes a wooden sword, a blanket worn as a royal cloak, and an abbot represented by a cooking pot. The chaplain does not laugh. Everyone else tries not to. The lady eventually does softly, and without covering her mouth. You hear it beneath the music and the crackle of the hearth. It is the first truly unguarded sound she has made all night. Near the hall doors, the eldest maid finally returns after changing her wet cloak. She catches the lady's eye and nods once more. Mother safe, child sleeping rode past without trouble. The lady raises her cup toward her. No announcement accompanies the gesture. None is needed. The dance slows, the sweet cakes diminish. Musicians lean more heavily over their instruments and servants begin collecting abandoned masks from benches. The paper crown has fallen into the rushes. The fox sleeps beside the wall. The stag is missing one antler and perhaps some dignity. Beyond the shutters, the deepest part of night gathers around the castle. Inside, torchlight moves over tired faces, empty cups, crumbs, ribbons, and the remains of celebration. Joy does not banish worry, winter duty, or the secrets already carried through these chambers. It simply sits among them for a while, warm and unexpected, before the first distant bell reminds everyone how little of the night remains. The distant bell does not end the feast so much as remind everyone that morning is waiting somewhere beyond the dark. Musicians lower their instruments, servants gather cups, fold trestle tables, and search the rushes for spoons, ribbons, and anything valuable enough to produce an accusation by daylight. The last sweet cake disappears beneath the aunt's folded napkin, though no one is brave enough to record this in the household accounts. You follow the lady from the great hall as torch after torch is extinguished behind her. The corridors feel narrower after music. Smoke hangs beneath the beams, a mask shaped like a fox lies abandoned beside an oak door, its painted smile now strangely tired. The lady pauses, picks it up, and hands it to a passing page. Return it to the chest. The page nods, already half asleep. Before the private chamber is reached, a nurse comes hurrying from the nursery. The lady's young son has awakened, frightened by the chapel bell, and insists that a horned creature has been standing beside his bed. The aunt looks back toward the hall. Tell him the stag has lost an antler and is no longer dangerous. The child does not find this persuasive. You enter the nursery where a single beeswax candle burns inside a pierced lantern. Shadows in the metalwork crawl across the walls like branches. The boy sits upright beneath his wool blankets, clutching a carved wooden horse. His hair is damp with sleep. The lady sits beside him. There is no horned creature, only a fur cloak hanging from a peg, and the long shadow of its hood. Yet childhood fear does not yield easily to sensible explanations, particularly at an hour when adults have begun mistaking cloaks for visitors themselves. The nurse turns the garment inside out and lays it across a chest. Some households place a knife beneath a child's pillow to cut bad dreams apart. Others hang coral wolf teeth or small cloth charms near the bed. The nurse has tied a red thread around the bedpost and tucked a sprig of dill beneath the mattress. The chaplain disapproves of the thread. The child sleeps better with it. No one can quite agree which authority matters more at 2 in the morning. The lady hums the final verse of the forest song heard earlier beside the harp. Her son's breathing slows. The carved horse slips from his fingers. She remains until his eyes close, then leaves one hand resting upon the blanket for several breaths longer. When you return to the outer chamber, the younger cousin is waiting alone. She has come back from the western manor. Mud marks her boots, and the end of her loosened braid is wet with mist. The brass ring is no longer in her possession. The lady notices this at once. Was the letter delivered? The cousin nods. And the answer? There was none. She sits near the dying fire, but does not warm her hands. For much of the night, disappointment has hidden behind duty prayer, childbirth, and celebration. Now, with the household thinning into silence, it finds room to speak. She says the man who returned the ring has agreed to another marriage, not by choice perhaps, not entirely. His father has debts. The neighbouring family offers land. Promises spoken in gardens and chapels weigh very little beside sealed contracts, witnesses, and hungry estates. Some swear that noblewomen accept such arrangements without protest because they understand the needs of family and inheritance. Songs prefer broken hearts. Household records prefer acreage. Even now it is hard to tell how many women grieve quietly between those two versions. The cousin removes the red thread from her purse. Only a short length remains. She holds it above the fire, but cannot release it. The lady does not tell her to be sensible. She does not mention duty or better matches. She simply sits beside her while the aunt turns away and begins counting candle ends with remarkable concentration. At last, the cousin winds the thread around her finger. I will keep it until I do not need to. The lady nods. This is not a cure, but most grief does not ask for one before dawn. A knock interrupts them. The eldest maid opens the door to admit a cloaked woman carrying a basket. For a moment you think she is another servant. Then the hood falls back, revealing the neighbouring widow, whose boundary dispute was discussed earlier. She has returned secretly because one of the elderly witnesses has died. The steward may challenge her claim before the next manor court. She brings a small parchment bearing the dead man's mark, signed before the village priest. The document is crude, the ink faded, but it states where the hedge stood before the great flood 12 years earlier. The lady reads it beneath the candle. Why come by night? The steward's nephew watched the road. Influence works quietly. So does fear. The lady places the parchment inside the writing case and gives the widow a pilgrim cloak from the household stores. She may sleep near the chapel and leave with the morning bread carts where fewer eyes will notice her. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such private protection is mercy politics or an efficient mixture of both. The widow bows and disappears behind the maid, yet the unfinished duties continue. A kitchen servant arrives to report that the celebratory fire consumed more wood than expected. A groom asks whether the messenger's horse may receive oats reserved for the lady's palfrey. A page confesses that the missing silver spoon has been found inside his boot, though he cannot explain how it arrived there. The aunt looks at him for a long moment. Was the spoon walking? No, my lady. Then your boot has had a remarkable night. The spoon is returned without punishment. The horse receives the oats. 2 servants are sent to the south wood store before frost hardens the cart track further. Orders are given for the newborn child's gift, soft linen, a silver coin, and a little carved saint to hang near the cradle. When at last the chamber empties, the fire has become a red hollow beneath grey ash. The cousin lies down fully clothed upon a bench. The aunt dozes with the stolen sweet cake still safely hidden. The eldest maid checks the latch, the shutters, the candle and the keys. Outside, the guards change watch. You hear their boots overhead, followed by the faint call passed from tower to tower. The monastery beyond the river remains silent, but not for long. The lady stands alone beside the shutter. She has prayed, governed, celebrated, comforted, judged, concealed, and waited. The public household imagines that noblewomen retire after supper into softness and idleness. Here, in the deepest hours, you see how little rest the night has offered. A child stirs. A widow hides near the chapel. A new mother sleeps miles away. Letters wait beneath stone. A red thread circles one tired finger. The last candle leans toward its own ending. Then, from across the river, the abbey prepares to ring the first bell before dawn. The first abbey bell reaches the castle before the sky begins to pale. Its note crosses the river, climbs the outer wall, and enters through every gap in shutter and stone. Guards hear it on the battlements, bakers hear it beside cold ovens. Servants hear it beneath wool blankets and pretend for one final breath that they do not. The lady hears it without turning from the window. Behind her the chamber begins to wake. The eldest maid stirs the ashes and coaxes a flame from the embers. The aunt opens her eyes and checks that the sweet cake hidden in her napkin has survived the night. The younger cousin remains curled upon the bench, red thread looped around one finger. Outside, darkness loosens slowly. You stand beside the shutter as the lady opens it a little. River mist fills the valley pearl grey beneath the coming dawn. Frost lies along the roofs. Smoke begins rising from the kitchen chimney. Somewhere in the yard a horse stamps, and the brown dog barks once at nothing anyone else can see. The castle's public life returns by degrees. A page carries fresh water upstairs. Kitchen boys drag wood across the yard. The watch captain reports that the night passed without danger, which is true if one ignores illness, childbirth, grief, disputed land, and secret letters. The lady washes her face in cold water scented with rosemary. Her attendants rebuild the figure the household expects. Hair is combed and braided, linen is pinned. The dark green gown is laced again. A veil hides the looseness of the night. Rings return to her fingers. The household keys are fastened at her girdle. Power jingles once more. The cousin wakes and watches. Before covering her hair, she unties the red thread from her finger. She folds it into linen and places it inside the purse at her belt. The brass ring is gone. Some promises linger like smoke after a banked fire. No one can quite agree whether keeping such a thread is wisdom or weakness. The aunt sees the gesture reflected in a polished metal mirror and says nothing. The first messenger of morning arrives before breakfast. Mother and child continue well. The newborn girl has a strong cry. The midwife requests more rose oil and says the blessed girdle should remain until noon. The lady sends the oil along with a note requesting that the girdle return before anyone decides it belongs to the manor. Mistress Aveline has slept, the pain has eased, and she has asked whether any sweet cakes remain. This is considered a good sign. The widow from Merriford departs with the bread carts beneath a pilgrim cloak. Her parchment lies safely inside the writing case. At the manor court, the lady will ensure that the dead witness's mark is read and the matching tally demanded from the steward. By then, the decision may appear orderly and official. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how many such judgments begin beside dying candles rather than beneath banners in a hall. You follow the lady down the main stair. Servants bow as she passes. The steward waits with his accounts. A visiting knight stands near the hearth, ready to discuss marriage as though no one spoke of it after midnight. She enters the great hall beneath pale window light. Last night's rosemary is crushed beneath boots. The feast masks are gone. Only one paper star remains beneath a bench. The brown dog trots beside her, carrying the missing antler from the stag mask. Breakfast is coarse bread, ale, cheese, and warmed pottage. The lady takes her seat. The aunt settles beside her. The cousin sits in her proper place, calm beneath her veil. The household sees noblewomen begin in another day. It does not see the prayers offered for travellers, the medicine prepared near midnight, the letters sealed after compline, the tenants protected behind screens, the birth celebrated beneath smoky rafters, or the grief wound quietly around one finger. Night leaves no official record of most of these things, yet its work remains everywhere. It remains in the oats given to a tired horse, the linen sent to a newborn child, the widow beneath a borrowed cloak, and the watchfire burning properly above the eastern wall. The lady breaks her bread. Morning spreads through the hall. Beyond the windows frost brightens. The river moves beneath mist. Abbey bells mark time while the old road waits for carts and pilgrims. And now the pace of the castle grows softer in your hearing. The voices in the hall drift farther away. The clink of cups becomes faint. Footsteps pass over worn stone and disappear beyond oak doors. Even the keys at the lady's girdle lose their sharpness, becoming only a small silver sound inside the warmth. You leave the table and walk once more through the quiet passage. The half-burned candle rests beside a cold brass holder. The fur-lined cloak is dry. The blankets have been folded. The little shrine waits in stillness, its painted saints watching over an empty cushion. Outside, the watchfires fade beneath morning light. You cross the inner yard slowly. Frost softens the mud. Horse breath drifts white in the air. The brown dog follows until the gatehouse then sits upon the straw and watches you go. Nothing hurries now. The castle remains behind you, warm at its centre, dim in its chambers filled with lives that continue, whether bells ring or fall silent. The women return to their duties, carrying their secrets gently, not as burdens, but as small embers sheltered from the wind. The road descends toward the river. Mist closes around the walls, towers become shadows, shadows become shapes, and shapes become only the memory of stone beneath a pale sky. Your steps grow lighter, the bells become quieter. The cold no longer reaches you. There is only the soft road, the distant water, and the steady warmth of a fire somewhere beyond sight. You may let the keys rest. You may leave the letters unopened. You may allow every gate to close without fear. The medieval night has ended. The candle is out. The hall is still. And you are safe, warm, and ready to sleep. Sweet dreams.